snow. My eyes become alive, the light that you shine can't be seen.
Hold up. My views are my own. You heard it here first. You heard it here first. You heard it here first. Lightning round. Dangerously close.
She loves me. She loves me not. She loves me. Awesome. Oh, hi, guys. It's me, Doug. I was just conducting an experiment to see if flowers feel pain, and also to see if my dog loves me. Spoiler alert, she does. But guess what? If there's one thing that I love more than love, it's that if you were to go and leave a 5-star rating for this podcast on your podcast app, or you could leave a nice review. You could say something like, I love this podcast, especially because this episode is all about love. You know what? If you really love me, or you love this podcast, you could share this podcast with a friend, or you could share it on your social media. That would be a lot of love, and boy, do I love love, and I know you guys love love too. And speaking of love, it's time to start the show. My guest today is award-winning adventure romance author Stacy Gold. Stacy would rather be in the middle of nowhere than almost anywhere else. To that end, she's run more than 50 rivers in 3 countries, been hella dropped into remote ski huts multiple times, and made it into even more under her own steam. And most recently completed a self-support kayak trip in the Grand Canyon. She has worked for the USDA Forest Service as a backcountry ranger, river ranger, and naturalist, and spent 14 years as a commercial river guide and kayak instructor in the Southeast, Rocky Mountains, and Pacific Northwest. Her last real job was serving as communications director for a statewide mountain biking nonprofit. What's up, Stacy?
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Man, this is not even, I have a question that it was my first question, but now that I read that again, it just reminded me, what is I just wanted to ask, what's a mountain biking nonprofit? Because I love mountain biking.
Yeah, so these days, pretty much most states and most towns, even some really small towns, have their own mountain biking nonprofits. And those organizations typically advocate for new trails. They do trail building, trail maintenance. A lot of them have educational programs so you can take classes. Lots of them offer group rides for free on different trails. So they're just, nonprofits dedicated to fostering mountain biking in a particular area. The one I worked for was statewide. And at the time when I started with them, we had 1 regional chapter. And when I left, we had 6. Which was super awesome because mountain biking has been spreading hugely.
It's one of my favorite sports, and I am so stoked to see that a lot on Instagram, just like in the reels, like in the little videos, just like how this new generation and like of just mountain bikers just doing all kinds of awesome stuff, and I just love it. I don't know. Anyway, I was just curious. I was like, oh, you did a mountain biking nonprofit. What exactly is that? I should here in Nashville, I should see what they've got available and see if I can get down with some of those guys and maybe do some volunteer work. I've built some trails, so I know what to do, or maybe I do.
It's always good to get out there. I really love building trails. It's super fulfilling to, actually see it and do one of those jobs where you see it done at the end. You can tell the difference, and then you get to ride it and you're like, oh, so nice.
Yeah. And that makes it a really good full body workout. Cause digging the trail, all that work that hits your upper body. And then, biking's a lot of lower body. I mean, biking's everything, but anyway, that was totally off topic. It wasn't even where I wanted to start, but I had just now reading your bio, I just recalled, I was like, what is this?
Yes, you should
But
absolutely check it out. I'm sure I know that IMBA is in Tennessee, which is the biggest mountain biking organization. They're our international mountain biking organization. But I'm pretty sure you guys have local too.
yeah, there's a bunch of dudes nearby. I won't go off on this for too long, but there are some dudes nearby. We have a park called Percy Warner Park, and it is illegal to mountain bike there. But a bunch of these dudes have kind of like made their own little spot that nobody's bothering them about it. They just kind of made some jumps and some trails that are just off in the cut away from the typical trails. And so far, so good for those guys. So maybe
Yeah,
that
that's
seems
a toughie.
it's a
Having worked for a
DIY.
mountain bike organization, I have to say that can cause you problems down the road in trying to get legal trail
Yeah.
put in. We had some big fights. We had one county that was always shutting down road trails that have been built, and jumps especially. They will take out because there's liability for them on their lands.
Oh
So
yeah, and then I imagine there's probably to it with the people that run the state parks, is how this might affect the ecosystem, putting in trails that's without having a naturalist or someone be like, hey, this is not, this is going to damage whatever.
right, don't build it here. There's some endangered salamander that
Yeah.
lives right here, or who knows. Yeah.
Yeah. As soon as I started praising this DIY trail project that these guys were doing, I immediately started regretting it because I was like, you know what, they might be doing some damage.
Well, we'll just move along from that.
So Stacy, like I was telling you before we started recording, I just read your book. This was a super fun book, and I can't think of the last time a book made me want to go backpacking as much as this. And I'm not a difficult person to push in that direction, but do you think there's people out there reading this book that are suddenly deciding, like, I'm not going to go to the beach for my vacation this year. I'm going to go solo hiking through the mountains?
Well, I certainly hope so. I don't know for sure, but I can say that with my previous book, I have a series of 3 novellas that are ski romances. And I had a woman get in touch with me who, by the time she read the 3rd one, she sent me this wonderful email about how, as a kid, she always wanted to go skiing, but she didn't have the money. So if her friends went, occasionally she'd go and just hang out in the lodge, but her family could never afford to actually rent gear and buy lift tickets and all that. So in her early 60s, she took her first ski lesson because of reading my little ski romance novellas.
Well, that's excellent.
And so I just thought that was so cool and so awesome. And I really hope it does. I hope it encourages people generally to get out there, whether solo or with others. And I really hope it encourages more women to get out there, again, solo or with others.
Yeah.
Because, for me, I started doing things solo, not really because I had a desire to go solo, but because I couldn't find anyone else to go.
Yeah.
And I just was like, well, if I wait for somebody else, I may never get to go do these cool things. So I guess I'm just going to go do them by myself.
Yeah.
And
you had a character in the book. I think her name is Allie.
Yeah.
She's like, hell no, I'll never go hiking. And that's her thing. She's a person, like, if she has a vacation, it's a beach, a vacation.
For sure.
And I think that obviously, I mean, if you go look at Florida, there's millions of people that think the same way. But yeah, like reading this book, I was like, man, don't get me wrong, I love to go to the beach. I totally love it. That's,
Sure.
But I was just vibing with this so hard. And I live pretty close to the Appalachian Trail. And I was like, man, I wonder, like, if I could get out for like a week and just just disappear on the Appalachian Trail for a week just by myself. Because you were bringing all those thoughts back into my head. And, in this book, that idea of just getting out in nature by yourself, and there's just nothing but you and nature. It's a very powerful experience.
It is. And I think it's funny that you mentioned Allie, because she gets the 2nd book in the series.
Cool. Okay. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's the 3 ladies, Jules, Allie, and Bryn. And Jules is the first book, Wild at Heart, that you just read. And then Allie's book is the 2nd book, Drive Me Wild. And it's really fun because she is totally like, I will never carry a backpack. That's just crazy. And of course, it's a backpacking book. So
Yeah.
Allie's going backpacking.
I can pretty much guarantee I will read it. I didn't know. I guess somehow I didn't know going in that this was a trilogy. I thought this was just a standalone.
Well, and I write them all to be read as standalones.
Yeah.
So, and I'm working on edits of book 2 right now, so it's not out yet. But I try and write them all as standalones. So you could come in anywhere in the series, pick up any one and read it and enjoy it. But I like having the crossover and the overlap so that you really get to know the 3 main characters throughout the series. So if you kind of fall in love with one of them in the first book, just know they'll have a book 2, and that'll be really fun. And you'll get to see everybody again in the later books, because whoever was the main character in one of the books becomes a secondary character.
That's cool. I like that the universe is expanding and that you can go and find out what's going on with all these other people.
I know. And there's actually already been calls for Evan's brother John to get his own book.
You would not believe that I was about to say that next. I was like, let's hear about this guy's life. I don't want to do any spoilers, and he is probably the most massive spoiler in the book, when he has a conversation with Evan on a bench, and there's a part where I was like, oh my God, I think I like threw the book. I was like,
I love it.
Couldn't believe the bombs he was dropping. But
so good, right?
I do want to move to just a slightly more philosophical kind of aspect of what of your writing, because like I was saying, this is a really fun book. I was having a great time. There's like thought-provoking stuff, and I guess I'll just go into kind of where I wanted to go, which is, Wild at Heart. It's a love story, of course, but you really pack a ton of stuff in here. And one thing in particular I was thinking was that it's also a love of the wilderness story. And you've got a character named Evan, like we said, who has a job in finance. And I don't totally understand what his job is, but it's in acquisitions. And whenever I think of those kinds of jobs, I think of the Borg from Star Trek, just trying to like absorb and assimilate, all these smaller companies, because they're all just trying to generate more capital for whatever purpose. And I think you make some really great points in that too, where you're saying like, he says that, what is the point of acquiring so much money that you have more than you ever need or will use, and then your life continues to be driven, your main purpose is to acquire more and more and more money. Do you have a personal philosophy about how, as humans become more and more disconnected from nature, the more we obsess over things like capitalism and consumerism?
Yeah, 100%. And I'm really glad that you picked up on that. And it's definitely something I just developed throughout my life, partly because I realized fairly early on, I'm not your quote unquote typical woman, especially I was raised in the South in Atlanta in the 80s. I did not fit. I was supposed to be going to the mall and doing my hair and makeup and nails. And I really just wanted to be outside. Playing in the outdoors and building things. And so I didn't fit, and I tried to fit, and I've tried to go down the path that everyone says you're supposed to. I've had jobs in sales and, recruiting and things like that, where I'm supposed to get all upwardly mobile. And now it's later in my life. I'm not as broke as I was when I first started working in the outdoor industry. I no longer live in the back of my pickup truck, but I was equally as happy then. Money doesn't bring happiness. Money relieves stress, right? Once you have a certain amount of money, you don't have to stress about it constantly, which is wonderful. But beyond that, what are you really gaining? Plan for retirement and the future and whatnot. But what would I do if I was worth $8 billion or, whatever? Me personally, I'd be donating it. I'd be buying large tracts of land and turning them into wilderness. And that is my absolute. And I know that there are sadly very few, but I know that there are some people in the billionaire class that are doing that. It's my favorite recent thing I've been learning about is people that are buying up as much land as they can to keep it out of the hands of developers. I think it's just incredible. Yeah. And I think for so many people nowadays, we really have. We've lost touch with ourselves. We've lost touch with nature. When I hear people who are like, oh, I hate camping or hiking or being out in the woods, I'm like, actually, you probably don't. You just probably really haven't done it. So it's uncomfortable for you. If you are, I'm of an age that I grew up wild and feral in the summers, running around, wading in creeks and building forts and climbing trees. And so to me, being out in the woods by myself has never been uncomfortable. That's how I grew up.
Yeah.
But a lot of people didn't. And I remember a number of years ago, I was in New York City and I hadn't been there in a while. And it was a hot day in the summer. And, New York City, if you've ever been there, there's little pocket parks in different spots and they've got grass. Every tiny little patch of grass had as many people on it as possible. We as humans are drawn to nature. We want to feel grass under our feet. We want the sun on our faces. We want to feel the breeze and hear the birds. And so many of us don't know it. And we're so sucked in to either working, trying to make money, spending way too much money on crap we don't need, or being online, or, basically watching other people's lives roll out in an electronic format on TV or online.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you can reconnect with the natural world and with yourself, everything slows down and your priorities really shift. And you start to realize that the things that are important are things like, your health, your family, your friends, your pets, other living creatures, other living things, and your own self are what's really important. And of course, right now, for all of us, we're all starting to experience climate change. I mean, it's getting pretty hard to say that, no, nothing weird is happening here.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Right.
The summer's been brutal. And I'm a very outdoors person too. So I can tell because I'm outside all year round and every summer. And this has been like painfully hot for certain things, for activities like biking and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it was really interesting to me because I went to school in Colorado in the early 90s and then left for about 22 years and came back. And just seeing the shift in the weather patterns and all of that and the fires. I mean, we don't have fire season anymore. It's pretty much year round now, which is wacky and wrong. And I think so many people have just lost touch. They're like so worried about, oh my gosh, somebody said there's a new Kate Spade collection coming out. I better buy all of that. Or I want a car that does all these things, fancy, whatever. And that stuff just isn't that important. And when you get out in the woods, especially when you get out there by yourself, it reframes everything. And you start to realize how important the natural world is to your health, your well-being, everybody's health and well-being.
You use a phrase, not to jump all the way into the epilogue. It's where I saw it, but I was like, and I may have heard it before. It's a nature deficit disorder.
Yeah.
Is that like I'm just curious, like, where did that come from?
It came from quite a while ago. I want to say, and I'm probably going to be wrong, I first heard the term maybe in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. And of course, right now, because you're asking me this off the cuff, I cannot remember. There was someone who wrote a book who first coined the term nature deficit disorder, and it was in relation to children.
Yeah.
And that was when people first started talking about, prescriptions for getting people outdoors and needing to get kids outside more.
Yeah. Well, like you said, for people like us being kids, like, because I was an outside kid. I mean, you couldn't you had to drag me back in the house. As a matter of fact, this is gonna sound. I mean, it's gonna sound like I just got away with anything as a kid, but it really was that I loved to be outside so much. I had a Sega Genesis, and if I was in trouble, if I was grounded, that was the only time I played video games because it was like my punishment was that I was inside. So right. But like so many kids now, it would be like, or even then, the punishment would be to take away your video games. Like then you're in trouble. But my mom knew that like me being stuck in the house was like, I already knew like the punishment was already severe enough. So like she'd be like, all right, go play Sonic the Hedgehog and you'll be,
Yeah,
So
you'll be losing your mind in about 2 hours, kid, right?
that was the level of outside kid I was, where I was like, I'm not on my bike, I'm not on my skateboard, I'm not building a treehouse. Which brings me back to something you just said a little bit earlier. We were talking about New York City, and whenever there's a patch of land that isn't concrete, everyone just gravitates towards it. Everybody wants to be on it. And you made me think. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but whenever a animal like a cow has been released from a factory farm and they experience grass or a pasture for the first time, the way they behave, where they express pure joy, and all animals do it, all farm animals, and we're animals as well. I mean, it's almost heartbreaking to watch a cow like that's walked on grass for the first time, to see
Yeah.
how happy they are, because then then you can no longer deny how unhappy that cow was in the factory farm. Sorry, I know that's a tangent, but what I mean to say is that we are animals too. It applies to us too. We're not meant to just be trapped in a box looking at a screen.
Yeah. And I've thought about that so much. I mean, I've seen those same videos you have. And I think the part to me that's almost the most heartbreaking is when they first try to get them to go outside and they stick their nose out, and you can tell they're like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, this is scary to me. And I always think about that's all the people who've never spent time in the outdoors who say they hate it. They're the ones with their nose sticking out the barn door going, oh, I don't know about this. I've never been out here. I don't know what this is. This terrifies me. And if they just let themselves get out there, in a few minutes, they would frolic with joy as well. Because you're right, we're all animals and we're all woven together in this web that's a part of the outdoors. And we all need more of it. And I mean, it's definitely a piece of what I try to do with my books is inspire people, like we were talking about at the beginning, inspire people to get out there in whatever way you can. I mean, maybe you'll never backpack. Maybe you'll never go solo on anything, but maybe you'll choose to go spend the afternoon at the park and go walk a nice trail out to a creek instead of sitting at home watching Stranger Things again. No, nothing against Stranger Things. I'm working my way through it myself. But
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite shows. I watched all of it. But I guess so you just used the word inspiration, and I guess speaking of inspiration in a different way, not you inspiring people to be outdoors, but things that maybe perhaps have inspired parts of your writing. And I'm not even entirely sure if inspired is the correct word, but when I think about back into the book, Evan almost dies in the book from his own inexperience with being in the wilderness, but also not to anyone that was listening that was just getting excited about going in the woods. This is very different. He went off on a trail with no way to communicate with anyone by himself in the mountains. I mean, it's definitely the kind of thing you shouldn't do with zero experience.
yeah.
But fortunately, Jules is there to save him. But then also another backpacker goes missing, and search and rescue has to be called in. And obviously, you spent a ton of time in the backcountry. You were a ranger, and would you be willing to share maybe some of the real life emergencies you encountered that might have perhaps inspired some of that stuff? Or
yeah, sure. I've been lucky in that I haven't had to deal personally with a lot of search and rescue, especially out on the trails. Most of what I've run into with hiking and mountain biking and being a ranger and that sort of thing has been your usual people are a little lost and turned around, or, somebody has tweaked themselves, but nothing horrible. However, working as a raft guide and as the safety kayaker, I have had some experiences where I've had people almost die on me, or I thought I was going to have somebody die on me. In fact, towards the end of my career in that world, part of what made me stop was, as of course, as you get older, you become more aware of how fragile we all are and how dangerous things really are. In your 20s, you kind of don't really even see all that.
Yeah.
And I was working as a safety kayaker on a run that was pretty big. It was early season, so we were running a different stretch of river with a lot of water in it because the regular stretch was too high. And one of our guides wrapped their boat on a rock and I think 5 people swam out of it in the middle of a very large, very long, very continuous class 4 rapid. And my husband and I were both safety kayakers on that trip. And I mean, at one point I had 2 people I'm towing to shore on the back of my boat. When I finally get to my last person, he's been getting hammered. He's been going over drops, getting recirculated in nasty hydraulics.
Yeah.
And, I've been chasing people, so I'm getting to everyone as quick as I can. I finally get to him. I get him to grab the back of my boat. I'm towing him to shore, and it's not easy. It's still very continuous, big whitewater. And at one point, he says very weakly, "I don't think I can hold on." And I was like, "You have to hold on.
Yeah.
You will die if you let go of my boat. You cannot let go." This
is non-optional.
Not optional. This is not a choice you get to make here. And I did get him to shore, and he spent a good bit of time puking up water. I mean, it was rough. And
I've been there for sure.
Yeah, and I've definitely I've had a couple friends over the years die whitewater kayaking. So I'm pretty aware of the dangers that are out there, and I don't want to downplay them in my books because I don't want to romanticize, being out there, because then we're going to get more Evans going out there with no experience, choosing stuff that puts them in way over their heads.
Well, this is like this podcast. Synchronicity is just every single episode has synchronicity, and for some reason, I mean, I don't even know why I get surprised anymore, because my next question. So when I asked you about that, I thought you might be like, "Oh, well, search and rescue," maybe something, but you went directly and answered a lot of my next question. I'm going to ask it anyway because it is about your writing, but you did just mention, I mean, clearly your experience with whitewater, being a safety kayaker out there, saving people, but you write the experience of near drowning beautifully.
Thank you.
Well, I know this because I have a lot of personal experience with near drowning. I've almost drowned in the ocean. I've almost drowned in rivers. I've had the experience like you just described of the guy that is trying to get the water out of his lungs because it's like it was damn near almost over.
Yeah.
And so this is really maybe more of a writing question though. How do you know how to write this experience of drowning so accurately?
Well, I myself have also nearly drowned a few times, especially in my career with raft guiding and learning to whitewater kayak and all of that. And then, so a lot of it comes from my personal experience. And that's true across all of my writing. Lots of people pick out different parts and go, "Oh my gosh, it seems so real." And that's because when I'm writing, I will literally close my eyes and think back to a similar moment in my own life. Whether I'm writing about, taking your boots off at the side of a stream and putting your feet in the cool water, or whether I'm writing about almost drowning in a river, I am quite literally thinking about my own experience. What did it feel like? What did it smell like? What was I thinking? All of those pieces. And then from a craft perspective, it was just spending a lot of time. I would have been more, if anybody is old enough to remember Mishner and his giant books with pages and pages of description. I leaned that way when I first started writing. And I had a fabulous critique partner, and she went through and she'd be like, "You don't need these 2 pages of description." I'm like, okay.
And I was so glad that your friend said that too, because this is one of the, I should have been recording when we were talking earlier, but one of the things I was saying is why I was enjoying your book so much is because it's I didn't want to put it down. It just kept me going. A chapter ends and I don't want to stop because the chapter ends, and that's a great way for a book to be.
It is, and I work really hard to make it that way, to make you get to the end of the chapter and be like, "Well, it's only 1:00 in the morning. Surely I could do another chapter,"
And like like what you just said too, with like drawing from personal experience and reality. And I guess there's more than one place where that stuck out to me, but obviously the near drowning, because I know exactly what it feels like to be in powerful water, or to be pinned underwater or in rapids. It feels different in different types of situations. Feels different in the ocean than it does in a river, sort of. But it's just water is so unbelievably powerful once it's got a hold of you and you're under. Hold up. It's time for a word from our sponsors.
Hello, it is I, French Pierre, attorney at law. Have you been accused of falling in love with a beautiful person on the hiking trail? And when you get back to Boston, your very mean, wealthy family has cut you out of your inheritance. Zut alors, French Pierre will fight for you. You may be entitled to 1 million francs and a 2-night stay at a Fontainebleau hotel. Sacre bleu, call 1, 2, 3, Pierre-François.
Wow, French Pierre, attorney at law. That's like a really specific thing. That's a lot like something that I read in the book we're talking about.
Well, you know, French Pierre is from the city of love, de Paris. So, I have read the book of which you speak. For French Pierre loves love. Call 1, 2, 3, Pierre-François.
All right, guys, you heard it here first. If you've been cut out of your inheritance for falling in love with a beautiful person on the hiking trail, call French Pierre, attorney at law, at 1, 2, 3, Pierre-François. And now back to the interview. Are there any more like things, maybe just in this book in particular, where that's like you just pulled straight from real life? You're like, this is a thing that an experience of mine that I thought was interesting and magical enough to I'm gonna throw it in here and have someone else experience it, have a character experience it.
Every time they take a swim in a high mountain lake.
Yeah,
that's all me.
that felt very real too. Oh, and that was the compliment that I gave you that we didn't record, is what I was going to say, that you write men's perspectives so well, and I called you a reverse Ernest Hemingway because Ernest Hemingway couldn't write a woman's character at all, and you, and the complete opposite, you write a men's character exceptionally well. Like, so I don't know.
And that is, I mean, I can't tell you what a huge compliment that is, coming from a guy who's also outdoorsy and has read my book. And as I mentioned a little when you said this earlier, I think it's partly because I have always leaned, I've always done the guy's sports, the guy's activities. I've always had the guy's interests. I was working on cars as a teenager, learning how engines worked and building things and playing in the woods. And so I've always had lots of guy friends. I've always felt more akin to men in the way that I operate in life and what society's expectations are of a woman. So I actually find it easier and more comfortable a lot of times to write the men than write the women. But luckily I'm able to do it because I am a woman and I do get it. It's just not where I live my life.
Yeah.
So for me, the guys, I'm just basically writing a, amalgamation of lots of people I've known. And
yeah. And what's, Evan has to stand up to his overbearing father, who's like a imposing figure. Like I see, it's kind of, the thing is interesting. I'm not an Evan. He's very, very different from the kind of person I am, but he feels so real to me, even though I'm not, I don't share a lot of experiences or traits with him.
Right.
But I do, I've known a lot of guys like that where it's like they got to get it out from under the shadow of their dad, and all that was, I don't know. Where did that come from? Is that, do you just know dudes that are just like, their dad was kind of like they were an adult and their dad was still fucking with their life somehow? Is that?
Yeah, I've known people like that. I've known families like that. And of course, we've all had examples of that in movies and TV as well.
Yeah.
And I tend to draw from lots of things. I like to take bits and pieces from my own life, other people's lives, maybe something I read or saw at some point, and then put it all in a big pot and make my own stew with it, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I guess that's
and
why.
we've
Oh,
all known the overbearing parent, haven't we, in some way, shape, or form?
yeah. Well, yeah, I was gonna say that's why I think maybe Star Wars was so successful, is so many people really that dynamic between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker struck a chord with so many people.
Right? I mean, there's so many parts of that even though you could say, oh, it's, it's sci-fi and it's all a big fantasy, there's a lot of bits of realism across all of it. It's just the circumstances that
Yeah.
are fantastical for us.
Yeah. And like Obi-Wan would be like the surrogate father. Okay, I'm gonna stop Star Wars talking now.
We could go off on that tangent for a while. I know. I just finished watching the Obi-Wans.
Oh, I have not. I love that. I love Ewan McGregor, man. Oh, love him so much. Have you seen Doctor Sleep?
No,
Have you seen The Shining?
I have not. I read it years
Oh,
ago.
well, um,
And I saw the original.
We actually did an episode on this podcast. I made I thought would be a very unpopular statement that Doctor Sleep was better than The Shining. Doctor Sleep is the prequel. No, it's the sequel to The Shining. So Stephen King wrote The Shining and he wrote Doctor Sleep. And I won't go too far into this, but Stanley Kubrick, he really, really took some liberties. Like, he went beyond taking liberties with The Shining to where it was unrecognizable from the book that Stephen King wrote. And I don't think Stephen King was very happy with that. And then he wrote Dr. Sleep much, much later. He wrote that like in 2011, I think. And the people that made that movie kept it true to the book. And I think it's a more fun, cooler movie. So.
All right. Now I'm going to have to check it out. I don't do a lot of horror anymore, but.
Dr. Sleep is okay. There's scary moments, but it's mostly just cool. A lot of astral projection. I don't know. It is. It's hard to say.
All right, I'll have to check it out though. You piqued my interest.
Scale from 1 to 10 on scary, it's a 7.
Okay.
I am so sorry that I took us down the Doctor. It's just when you brought up Ewan McGregor, I was like, I gotta tell you about Dr. Sleep. It's like one of my favorite movies.
Well, and it's kind of interesting because it leads me to a point that'll kind of circle us back around.
Okay.
I used to read a fair amount of horror, and I went through a big Stephen King phase years ago. But one of the reasons I started writing romance and reading romance is because I feel like there's so much stress and negativity and crazy, horrible stuff going on in our world that, with romance, you're always guaranteed it's going to end happy. It's part of the romance genre. It's the one convention you must meet. It has to have either a happily ever after or happily for now at the end. The couple must get together and be happy together at the end. And I mean, you can put a lot in between. Obviously, I have near-death scenes and things like that. And, it goes up and down. But anymore, if I'm going to spend a lot of my time with something as a reader or a writer, I want it to be something that ultimately is happy and feels good.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I combined all my love of the outdoors with the writing of romance, because I really love romance. And there's some great books out there. And there's a lot of great indie stuff coming out. And even traditional publishing is starting to shift the type of romance novels that it's putting out. Not quite quick enough for me, which is why I had to start writing my own. But it's just so nice to be able to create a world that I would want to be in on my own time anyway.
Yeah. That is exactly, so yeah, I've read a lot of Stephen King too. I read a lot of horror and I read a lot of I read mostly sci-fi. That was such an interesting thing getting into this book too, because like, I don't know, maybe I'm like a little warped too because I'm consuming too much of one type of genre, or do you know what I mean? Because there were so many times in your book where I expected a catastrophe that would have been kind of inappropriate, like I don't want to spoil anything, but there's like there's some scenes. There's one in particular where I was like, oh no, Evan's dead, like right, like in one particular scene where I was like, And I was like, God, it's what the hell? But it's so early on in the book that it wouldn't make sense. I mean, I guess I could have just looked at the book and been like, I'm not even halfway through. Like, what would the story continue to be if he is already dead before the book is at halfway point? I don't know. I guess I do expect that, because I do, especially if you read Stephen King, he'll just kill off a main character and that you've grown to like.
Oh, yeah. Or like Game of Thrones. I mean,
Oh
George
yeah.
R. R. Martin.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Right? You'll be like, wait, who's going to die now?
Yeah.
And that's part of what I love about romance is nobody's going to die. It's going to be okay in the end. I mean, there are some books where death, I mean, even in my book, somebody dying factors in,
Yeah.
but it's not on page. It's in the past. And
death is part of the world. It still exists in the human world.
Exactly.
Can I say the most ridiculous part of the book that should not have worried me at all, but I don't know why. So things are going really good, and I'm like, and I'm rooting for these people. I want them to be happy, and things are starting to get like, things have been really shitty and they're getting good again. And then Evan is like, he's riding his bicycle. I ride my bicycle every day. I ride my bicycle in traffic every day. It's not something that I should consider like a dangerous activity, but I just like, once again, maybe I'm a little warped for books now and for a story that's uplifting. And so he's happy. He's on top of the world. He's riding his bike, and I'm like, he's gonna get hit by a car.
Yeah, different genre.
I couldn't make it. Like, I was like, I wanted to skip to the end, like, of the chapter, just to be like, just put him in the coma, put him, or tell me he's dead, like, because he rode his bike and a car got him. Like, that's so. Anyway,
yes.
that's a me thing.
You've been reading different genres, and that's it. That's why I love romance so much, because I remember one of the last books I read outside the romance genre that everybody was like talking about and, raving about, and I think won a bunch of awards, and it was a beautiful book, but it was The Kite Runner. And that is the saddest book. Like, the ending of that book is so sad. And so it was kind of like the last thing I read outside the romance genre, because I was just like, I can't do it. There's too much horrible, sad, stressful stuff going on in the world.
I'm unfamiliar with, I mean, I know the title and I know that it's tragic. Is that is that a war book?
It is related to a war. It happens, the book takes place in the Middle East. I mean, it's a beautiful book. It's beautifully written. I really did like the book, but at the end, I just felt so horribly sad.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's just enough in this world already making me horribly sad, that if I'm going to read or write, I want to write things that in the end are happy.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's you're the creator of your world. You do it, you do what you want with it. Oh, this brings me, I got to ask you this. Everybody knows that sex is fun, of course, right? But sure, you make it sound even more fun by being part of a mountain adventure. But there are more than a couple characters that mention that trail romances don't last, as though this is kind of like a saying that people, I don't know. I was curious. Is that really a saying? Like, are trail romances particularly more doomed than like an office romance? Is that in the trail community, is that a thing? I don't know anything about this.
It is a thing. It's a general thing too. Like, even a lot of times trail friendships, particularly when people through hike, a lot of people through hiking, you'll just sort of end up seeing the same people over and over because you're all kind of going the same speed.
Yeah.
So you'll sort of keep leapfrogging each other or ending up at the same shelters or whatever. And you create these relationships that are really tight and seem like they're going to last forever. But then when you all leave that context and you're scattered back to wherever you're from, it's somewhat rare that even the trail friendships that people really stay in touch.
Yeah.
I've known some people who did, and trail relationships are the same way. It's kind of like your summer camp friends.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
you're-
your summer camp friends are like the closest friends you'll ever make that you'll never ever stay in touch with.
exactly. It's that same kind of thing. And it's a friendship that might work outside of, that one environment, but you don't live close to each other.
Yeah.
Real life takes over, and it's just not the same. You're in this very special bubble
Yeah.
when you're on the trail or on a big trip.
I guess it's cool though, because it's like you do have the opportunity as an adult to kind of recreate a summer camp experience, right? Like you
Yeah,
get out there
in a way. I
in a
mean,
way it's different, but yeah.
yeah, and it's a lot of it, I'm just writing the adventures that I would like to be going on right now.
I think
Kind of.
I think you referenced a walk in the woods at some
Yeah.
point, and it reminds me when you're saying like that the friendships don't last, and that when I don't know how Bill Bryson ended up like how the relationship with his friend. For anyone that hasn't read it, he went to hike the entire Appalachian Trail. He was exceedingly out of shape when he started, and he brought his friend along who was also fairly out of shape, who was recovering from some addiction problems and a lot of drinking and drugs and stuff. And anyway,
neither of them really know what they're doing.
Yeah, they both. Yeah, it's a very funny book, and honestly, speaking of books that made me want to go out and hike, that was one of them. In addition to yours, but yeah, there's a part where they are getting pretty far along the trail, and then the buddy falls off the wagon and starts getting drunk as shit, and it fucks up their trip. It fucks up the hike. It's kind of like over.
Yep.
And I was like, and I kind of like I find it hard to believe that those guys like really hang out much again after the hike.
Yeah, I know. I wondered about that, but not to give too much of a spoiler. The book's been around a long time. There was a movie. Hopefully everybody's seen it and knows it. But the scene where his buddy just starts hucking stuff from his pack off the side of the mountain, like critical stuff, food,
because it's heavy.
Because it's heavy and he's just over it.
Yeah.
It's such a classic moment to me. And I name checked the book on purpose because it is one of the books that inspired this story.
There's a scene in that I like very much. Although it's like it is sad because the drinking is what ultimately kind of makes it where they're both like, dude, we got to stop. We're like not up to this, but they stop for supplies, and he dips off because he's like he doesn't have any of his own money, so he keeps taking money from Bill, and he comes back and he's like acting like real weird, and he's like, hey man, I need like $20 to buy some sodas. And he's like, why do you need $20 to buy sodas? Because basically he keeps like lying to him, telling him he's buying sodas and asking for cash. And then he just goes off and buys like a 12-pack of like Budweiser and like chugs it, and then comes and asks for more soda money. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, it's such a great book. I think that book and then Cheryl Strayed's Wild are sort of the two of the books that were kind of my touchstones.
Yeah,
a little bit when writing this one in terms of other books about people having great adventures backpacking.
Absolutely. Stacy, I got to tell you something. We are getting dangerously close to the lightning round. So I have to explain to you how the lightning round works. It's different than the rest of the kind of questions I've been asking you, because in the lightning round, I ask a question and you don't have any time to think. You just have to go with a gut reaction and say the first thing that comes to your mind. So some of these questions, and I know in particular, I think some of them you're going to be like, oh, come on, man. There's no way I could just answer, or I could just pick one or whatever. But you have to, because it's the lightning round. So
okay.
Does that sound fair? It is the game section of the podcast.
I love a good game.
I have a feeling you're going to win.
I always win. Everyone's a win, right?
You seem like a winner to me, and I know that you know the answers to these questions. All right. You've been to some of the most beautiful scenic places in the world. What's the best view you've ever seen? Where was it?
Probably the Tetons.
Love the Tetons.
Yep. I actually got married right on the banks of the Snake River with the Grand Teton in the background. It's fabulous.
Okay, I'm going to sound very ignorant. Where are the Tetons?
Jackson, Wyoming.
Wyoming. Okay. Sorry. I have never, that's one of the few states in this great nation of ours I've never visited, but I really, really want to go there really bad.
But it is an impossible question because, of course, I could be like the Grand Canyon. That was amazing. And Switzerland. And yeah, you know.
It is an impossible question, but I love how you just nailed it. You were like, Tetons, done. This is a good lightning round. We're kicking ass. Okay. So you're telling me that every year, if you go out in the woods in Washington, you can see hundreds of shooting stars in one night, and presumably be able to make hundreds of wishes as well, because the shooting stars are right there. What is this and how do I do it?
This is the Perseids meteor shower, which in fact, the peak of it was last night.
I missed it. So I have to wait a year.
You can still probably see some. I mean, you'll still get to see quite a number of them for a few days before and a few days after. And it's ideal. This year hasn't been as great because it's a really full moon, which makes the sky bright.
Yeah, I heard about that. I heard about the full moon obscuring some celestial activity.
Yes, but everybody can see it. It always happens around the middle of August. We're going through the trail left by, I think it was the Halley-Bopp comet, which only comes around once every 40 or 60 years, something like that. Don't quote me. Okay. And we go through its debris trail every year in the middle of August. And that's what causes the Perseids meteor shower. Okay,
so can you only see this? Do you have to be like in the Pacific North? You should. I could see it. I could have seen it here if I had gone out in the woods.
Absolutely. In fact, the very first place I ever saw it was my first year working as a whitewater raft guide on the Ocoee River in Tennessee. And I knew nothing about meteor showers. And all the guides were like, hey, come on, we're going to flip some rafts over up on top of the bus and go hang out and watch the shooting stars. And I was like, shooting stars? What's this? And we laid up there for till 2 a.m. watching the Perseids. And so they've long been kind of a favorite of mine. And I try and catch them every year if I can.
Well, I feel like a fool. Now I have a year to wait. But
just wake up at about 3-4 a.m. And if it's clear out, go head outside and you'll probably see some tonight.
It's not a total loss. And I was going to say too, next year will be even cooler. The Ocoee River is one of my favorite rivers to raft down. And it's funny, we were talking about summer camps. I used to go to the Ocoee River summer camp when I was a little kid.
Nice. So, I know. I love that river. It's such a blast.
It's so fun. I'm trying to think. I've rafted on the Denali, the Ocoee, and something in Colorado, but I can't remember the name of it.
Probably the Arkansas.
I have no recollection. It was really fun. That's all I can say. Nice. Okay, sorry. This is a lightning round. What am I doing?
We digress.
Next question. I was just up in Seattle for the summer solstice, and I went to the Naked Bicycle Parade. Are Jules and Evan the type of people that would participate in the Naked Bicycle Parade? Just want to know if you think.
Jules 100% wouldn't hesitate. She's probably done the Naked Bicycle Parade before.
Yeah.
Evan would question it, and Jules would convince him, and he would do it, and then think it was really hilarious after.
I can see that. He would need some coaxing.
A little coaxing, because you need a little coaxing on to get naked swimming in the lakes too.
Yeah, for sure. I enjoyed a lot of this is just kind of just by accident, because I mean, I had no way of knowing you were going to be some of the locations that you use in this book, like Snoqualmie. I'm very familiar with it. I go snowboarding there. Obviously I know Seattle really, really well. I don't, live there, but I am there often. It's the city that I am in the most besides the one I live in. So it was cool just being like, you're like, oh, he moved to Fremont. And I was like, dope.
Yeah, I lived in Seattle for 15 years. So that's how I
got the impression you had lived in Seattle or still did because of the descriptions you were doing of the city and the area around there. All right, this one pretty hard. I guess I want to preface it saying all things being equal. So you will have the same amount of appropriate gear either way. It'll be the same amount of extremity either way. But I am curious, just for personal preference. Would you rather hike 100 miles in extreme cold or in extreme heat?
Ooh, that's a really good one.
And like I said, in both instances, you have all the proper gear. It's not so you're not. I don't, you have everything you need, and
Yeah.
and the amount of how cold it is about how hot it is, like to your tolerance levels, I suppose.
I would have to go with cold simply because I am a general believer that cold is better than hot because you can always put more clothes on. But at a certain point when it's hot, you're just naked and sweaty, you know?
Man, I don't know how I would answer it. I might have to go hot. If it's like a desert, I think I could go through 100 miles of desert if I had an unlimited water source.
Well, and I had to think about it for a second, but which I shouldn't do in the lightning round. But I've also done a fair amount of ski touring. And so I've spent a fair amount of time doing miles in the cold and the snow and whatnot. And then I've spent a fair amount of time because I grew up in Georgia being out in the hot.
Yeah.
And yeah, heat drives me crazy.
Yeah. I mean, bottom line, man, it sucks to be too cold and it sucks to be too hot.
Pretty much. Yes, exactly. It's all about the right clothing. And like I said, when you're hot, at a certain point, you've taken everything off and then you're just naked and hot. At least if you're cold, you got options still,
Yeah, for sure. Well, Stacy, I have one last question. It's the most important question of the entire podcast. That is, where can people find you? Where can people find your books? Everything that you're willing to share for everyone out there in podcast land to know about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can learn more about me and find all my books on my website at stacygold.com. And it's all spelled the easiest way possible. STACYGOLD, no extra E's, I's, anything like that. And you can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at author Stacy Gold. And then you can find me live if you happen to be in Colorado on Thursday, Thursday the 18th. Next Thursday, I'll be in Fort Collins at Old Firehouse Books doing a conversation with another local romance author, Mariah Onkman. And then on the 26th, I will be in Frisco up in Summit County, which is where all the ski areas are. For people who are familiar with Breckenridge and Keystone and all of that. I will be in Frisco at the Next Page Books and doing reading and signing. So folks can come find me live there. But otherwise, head over to my website at stacygold.com. Find me on social media. Hit me up. Talk to me.
Yeah, everybody go check out Stacy. She's awesome. Her books are so fun.
Yeah, and buy yourself a copy of Wild at Heart.
Yeah, I truly enjoyed it and really enjoyed talking to you today, Stacy. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a ton of fun, and I'm thrilled that you enjoyed Wild at Heart.
She loves me. She loves me not. She loves me. Oh, hey guys. I guess the episode's over. I guess you caught me doing my experiment again, trying to find out whether or not flowers feel pain. Still haven't figured it out yet. I'm only on trial number 2. If you're curious about the experiment results, you can contact me at myviewsaremyown.com or on Instagram at myviewsaremyown_podcast or on Twitter at myviews_podcast or on Facebook at, I don't know how you would, I guess, just go on Facebook and search My Views Are My Own. I have not updated that one in a while. Or you could just send me a love letter. Thanks for listening, lovebirds.